So I've been out here at Red Rock Canyon taking some landscape photos this morning, and I thought we could talk about something I get asked about all the time, which is how do you get a landscape photo to be sharp from front to back, edge to edge, all in one take? So I'm going to show you how I do that today. Okay, so before we start, to all you new subscribers, thank you. I'm super excited about the community we're building here, and I look forward to meeting you online. And if you haven't subscribed already, we do simple to understand photography and video tutorials, insights, and reviews. So hit that subscribe button, you won't be sorry. Okay, so sharpness. It's certainly not the most important aspect of landscape photography. I mean, composition is always going to win out there, but there is something satisfying about seeing a photo that's super sharp from edge to edge, front to back, that you feel like you could just step inside the landscape, feel those textures, the rocks, the leaves, the trees. And there are all kinds of ways to maximize the sharpness of your image, including focus stacking or blending, and then pixel enhancements in your post-processing. But today, we're going to focus on making an image that is super sharp from front to back, edge to edge, all in one take. And so I'm going to give you a simple set of rules to follow and even a cheat sheet for you to print out or put on your phone to take with you for your next landscape outing. And I'll put a link to that in the description below. Okay, so let's talk about the first rule of sharpness, which is stabilization. So the first thing you're going to want to do is take a good look at your scene and determine if there's anything that's moving in your scene that you want to freeze, whether it's water or wind that's making the leaves or trees or grass move. And then you know that you're going to have to adjust your shutter speed to be above 160 or 250 in order to freeze that movement. Now, some of you may know that I like to use aperture priority, and so I set my ISO to a minimum shutter speed in order to freeze that movement. I did a whole video about that I'll link below if you haven't seen it, all about aperture priority and how it's easier to use for landscape photos. Okay, so the next thing you're going to want to do is make sure that you have your camera as stable as possible. Now, you can certainly get some sharp photos using handheld these days, especially with the in-camera and in-lens stabilization systems we have, but you're going to want to make sure that you stabilize the camera the best you can. So what I like to do is, that's a serious bug. So what I like to do is take a two-hand firm grip on the camera, not so firm that my hands are shaking, but then I use the camera strap around the back of my neck and hold it tight so I'm stable, the camera's stable, I've got 3 points of contact, and now I'll use a wide stance as low as I can get that I'm comfortable and hold myself as steady as possible as I take the shot. Now, all that said, you're most likely to get a better result if you're using a tripod. Now, a word of note here, there's a whole range of prices for tripods, from super cheap to super expensive. And all I can say is, don't go cheap on the tripod. It will make a difference. Trust me, I learned the hard way on this one too. Now, once you have your good tripod, make sure that you set it firmly in the ground, the legs are wide apart, keep the camera as low to the ground as possible that allows for your scene, and then use the thickest part of the legs of the tripod and the most able to stabilize your camera. Next, don't forget to either secure or even remove your camera strap, as these can also blow in the wind and, cause your camera to shake. That's something I love about these Peak Design camera straps, where it's so easy to just clip them on and off, and then I'll take it, put it around my neck, and just wear it kind of like a necklace until I'm ready for my next spot, so I can just clip it back to my camera and then be scouting as I move around. And the good news, I have one of these brand new Peak Design camera straps in the box that I'll be giving away soon, so be sure to watch my community page. I'll be posting about the giveaway there. And you may have heard me talk about this before, but if you keep the stabilization on, it actually can produce micro movements as that gyroscope is looking for the movements to stabilize against, which will in turn make your image soft. Also, if you have a DSLR, you're going to want to lock the mirror up, and if you have a mirrorless camera, you want to use silent shutter, and that way you'll minimize all of the mechanical movements in the camera, which also can produce micro movements, which can make your image soft. Now, all that said, if it is super windy outside, I will keep the stabilization of my camera on because I know that the camera is moving a little bit with the tripod. If it's super windy, really extreme, you can actually gently place a hand on top of your camera, and then I like to shoot in continuous mode to maximize a chance of getting a sharp shot. So the next thing you'll do is choose your aperture, and camera lenses these days are typically 2.8, 4.0, all the way up to f/22. Now 2.8 is going to be the widest aperture, and it's going to have the narrowest depth of field. And f/22 will be the tightest aperture, which will be the deepest depth of field. Now, it would stand to reason that since you can go up to f/22, well, that might allow you to get the entire image in focus with one shot using that aperture. However, physics works against you in something that's called lens diffraction. Now, diffraction has to do with the curvature of the lens, the light entering the curvature, then bending to compensate for that curvature, and this in turn can produce some distortion which will soften your image. And it's usually only apparent above f/16. So I like to keep my f-stop between f/5.6 and f/16 if at all possible. Now, most lenses, if you look at test results, will be sharpest between f/8 and f/11. You may not be able to tell the difference yourself unless you really pixel peep, but I still keep it between f/8 and f/11 when I can. Another thing to note is that not all lenses are manufactured precisely the same. And what I mean there is that sometimes there's some quality control issues even with the most expensive lenses. So if you find that you're going through all these steps and you simply cannot get a sharp image out of your lens, there may be something wrong with it. So don't be afraid to send it back to whoever you bought it from, or contact the manufacturer to see if there's something wrong with the lens, and they'll send you a new one if there is. Okay, so you've got your camera on the tripod, it's steady, you've got the steady shot off, you've got your silent shooting or your mirror lock up, and now the only question is where to focus on your image. And what I like to do is find the hyperfocal distance. Let me show you. Basically, what you're trying to do is determine what the closest object is to your camera in the image, and then you're going to focus on a point that's double that distance from the camera. And so in this instance, the Joshua tree here is the closest object to the camera that's going to be in focus. So I know that that's about 2 meters away from the camera. So what I need to do is double that to 4 meters and focus on an object that's about that far away from the camera in order to get sharpness from front to back in the whole image. As long as I know that my aperture is closed down enough, that my depth of field is deep enough, then I can gain that focus from front to back. So I like to use autofocus single exposure, and I use something that's called the flexible spot metering in order to gain my focus. And I like to close that down to either medium or small, depending on the object that I'm trying to focus on. And you can see here, this little square gets bigger or smaller, and then I just move this to the spot that I want to focus on. I use back button focus, gain my focus, and then I just press my remote to take the exposure. Now, all that said, if you're trying to take super extreme depth of field images with a super wide angle lens, you may not be able to get the entire image sharp in one take. So in that case, you'll have to take multiple focus exposures, one for the foreground, one for the middle, one for the background, and then blend those together in a single image. Let me know if you want me to do a video about how to do that, and leave it in the comments below. Okay, so the next tip is to remove your hand from your camera as you take your exposure. So you can either set a 2-second or a 5-second timer, or what I like to do is I like to use a remote so I can be sure that I'm not shaking the camera itself as I take the image. And you can find these remotes pretty cheap online. And the last thing you're going to want to do is take a look at your image. For the love of God, pixel peep your image to be sure that you got it sharp from front to back, edge to edge, exactly the way you want it. The worst thing you can do as a landscape photographer is spend all this time and energy, go all the way out to this beautiful landscape, set your image, find your composition, take the exposure, think you've nailed it, go home, pull it up on a big screen and see that it's not in focus. Don't do this to yourself, please. Let me save the heartache for you now. You don't want to be out in Iceland and then come home to see that your image is not sharp. Take a good look at your image before you leave that spot. Okay, I hope that helped, and if you feel like it did, please hit that like button as that really does help. Don't forget to get your sharpness cheat sheet. I'll put a link to that in the description below. And if you're interested in aperture priority, I did a whole video and made a cheat sheet for that also. I'll put a link to that in the description below and you can check it out. And if you haven't already, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and a little notification bell to stay in the loop around here, and I'll see you in the next video.